Hello and welcome to FLW TV. My name is Ben Wignall and this is the latest instalment of our club takeover series, and it's the turn of League One's Lincoln City. I'm delighted to be joined by Jake Tonge. Jake, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm very good on this very cold Wednesday night up north. Now, as ever, if you are a Lincoln City fan or anyone watching this, please do not hesitate to get involved. Leave a comment on Facebook or YouTube, and don't forget to share this on whatever platform you're watching on. Without further ado, let's get on with the show. So it was a very busy summer at Bank after the heartbreaking playoff final defeat for Lincoln back in May in terms of transfers, both in and out. Firstly, touching on outgoings, two pretty key players departed at either end of the window. George Grant left for Peterborough, having scored 13 league goals, 9 assists last season, and very late on in the window, Theo Eden departed for Blackburn, both for undisclosed fees. Understandably, Jake, I guess you were disappointed to lose both, but are you of the mindset that you don't mind too much if they're going to, a higher league to further their careers, or do you think the club could have done more to keep them?
Um, I think pretty much once the day we lost the playoff final, it was pretty much resigned to losing George and quite a couple of the loanees, which we'll probably talk about later. Um, yeah, in terms of George, really, we sort of knew that when he signed his new contract in the January of last season, so this January, that there was a deal, that there was a clause in there that if a championship club had come in and we hadn't got promoted, we were pretty certain that he was going to be gone. In terms of Teo, from when he came into the football club, sort of just before the COVID pandemic sort of hit really. He's developed massively so in the last sort of 18 months or so, and it was really no shock, especially the way that he started the season, that championships were coming calling really. And in terms of player ambition, I don't think we could have done much more. I mean, we could have got promoted obviously at Wembley, but no, I don't sort of envy George or Teo really, because they're both getting regular minutes in the Championship. Teo just sort of getting into the Blackburn side now. He did sort of well against Sheffield United from what I've heard, but George George is doing well at Posh as well. Shame to sell to a local rival, but when they're in a division above and they're offering and there's clauses and stuff involved, you can't really do too much. And from the club, it's sort of good. It shows players, future recruits, maybe that we're the right place for you to come to if you want to get a move into the Championship. You're looking at a lot of players in League Two and League One that will want to go on to the Championship, and we're sort of showing that we're a good step, a stepping stone, that we won't stand in your way. If you can't go there with us, we can look to say onto a team that are there and are established to that level.
Yeah, Lincoln definitely does seem like a good platform for younger players to come in and prove their worth. And obviously with that top six finish last season, it just proved there's a lot of talented players there. And obviously a few of them have gone on to the Championship now. Looking at the incoming to the club, they went down the route again of getting loan players in from the leagues above. Josh Griffiths, Dan Lundulu, Luis Fiorini all replaced outgoing loanees, Alex Palmer, Morgan Rogers, and Brennan Johnson, who all did good things last season. And, there's permanent signings, mostly younger players, the likes of Lassie Sorensen, TJ Ioma return, and then there's a bit more experience from the championship levels like Teddy Bishop and Chris Maguire, who've done it at League One and Championship in the last few years. Were you happy with the incoming transfer business, Jake? And it does seem like, the club reinvested the funds from, Grant's sale. Obviously, Eden's sale came late in the window. Several of them being undisclosed fees, which is, surely a good sign, and also the strategy of signing younger players who have resale value. It does seem to be a good one for the club.
Yeah, I think sort of it's a Michael Appleton way of running a football club, isn't it? Where he's done it before. He did it at Oxford. Signed a lot of good young players that are now applying their trade in the Championship. So obviously you're disappointed to not be able to get Brennan Johnson back and Morgan Rogers back. But when you look at what they're achieving, especially Brennan at Forest, he's like the main man down there, and then Morgan Rogers is playing for probably the best teams in Championships I've ever seen at Bournemouth at the moment. So obviously disappointed not to be able to get those guys back. Dan Lundulu, who you spoke of, he's not quite hit the ground running yet. He got a goal at Wigan. He's looked better ever since, but it's his first senior loan spell, so we're sort of having to give him a bit of time. Fiorini, it's his first loan spell within England last year. He was out in the Dutch second division. So he's sort of getting to grips, and he's been in and out of the team. Josh Griffiths is probably the only loanee that sort of cemented his place in the first team, but especially with what's happened over sort of the last 72 hours, it looks like he might be going back to West Brom. We don't know. But in terms of the permanent signings, one that you mentioned there, TJ, who we had from Spurs last year, really impressive while on loan playing at right back. But ever since sort of Regan Poole's come into the football club in January of this year, DJ sort of been ushered out slightly because we had no idea that we'd be able to sign him on a permanent. We expected Tottenham to want to use him. And then another one that you didn't mention, Jamie Robson, who was there to replace Teo. He's coming from Dundee, came with quite a good pedigree, scored against Rangers. I think I saw quite a few Sunderland fans saying that they might want him, Wigan fans as well, at the sort of summer window. We managed to buy him, probably thankful to the money that we invested with Teo Eden. And he's been phenomenal since coming in. He's much better than what we had in Cohen Brown. And I think he's probably a better left back than Teo, because Teo was a midfielder pushed out wide, which he's sort of done the same at Blackburn as well. But yeah, the signing that I was most pleased with was Chris Maguire. Obviously done it at this level before with Sunderland. He's really that nasty figure that you need in any changing room. I think Michael Appleton sort of alluded to when he was at Oxford. He had Alex McDonald, who's now at Gillingham, as that sort of nasty player that sort of winds the opposition up, gets in the referee's ear, and Mags has been doing plenty of that since he joined. You know, I was at Wigan the other night. They scored a goal that was disallowed a handball. Mags was straight pointing at the lad who put it in with his hand. So yeah, so obviously the recruitment is Michael Appleton's way. It's young players from clubs higher up. So yeah, I mean it's great. Obviously we've got expectations of trying to get back to where we were last year. Unrealistic, we probably know. But I can imagine once you give these players a year or two gelling together, we should be looking towards the playoffs probably next season or the year after.
Yeah, it's definitely a good recruitment strategy to have. Well, Lincoln currently sitting 13th in the table in League One, 7 points behind the final playoff place, but of course it's still early days. Jay, what have been your thoughts on the season so far? You know, especially recent games, there's only been one loss in the last six. Big win over Wigan Athletic away recently, which, you know, suggested things might suddenly be starting to click, but, you know, there's been drop points as well. You know, Shrewsbury, it was a 1-1 draw and a loss at home to Wimbledon. So it does seem like there's a little bit of inconsistency there, and it might be, as you mentioned, you know, it might just need a bit of time to click this new squad.
Yeah, I think in terms of the club as well, the club need a little bit of time of consolidation, because if you sort of look back from when we came up from the conference, we sort of just flew straight through League Two with the playoff finish, and then obviously winning the title the year after. We sort of need the off-field club to sort of catch up with the on-field part, which the club are looking to do. But again, in terms of, are we clicking yet? We all thought that after the Cambridge performance when we went down there and won 5-1. Best performance of the season. We were fantastic that day. It looked like everything was settling in, and then obviously we go and lose a couple of games off the back of that, and you think, well, the thing is as well, we have such a young squad. Appleton's assembled a really young squad. I think he did the same last year. I think that's just the way he likes to operate, and with young players, you expect them to be inconsistent, especially with players that are coming out on their first loans, like the likes of Dan and Lewis from teams in the Premier League. You know, we're inconsistent, but probably a consolidation year this year, like you sort of said at the start of that question, would probably be for the best of the club and probably in terms of the team looking to push on for next year as well.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the rest of the league quickly, you know, we saw Wigan and Ipswich both spend heavily this summer with new owners. You know, Sunderland and Sheffield Wednesday did some eye-catching business as well. It's kind of meant that Lincoln and a few other teams' transfer business kind of almost, you know, went under the radar. Do you think it's a little bit unrealistic now because of these teams coming in and spending quite a bit of money? Do you think it's unrealistic to expect a playoff finish this season?
I think so, yeah. I was one of the idiots that sort of got caught up in pre-season and thought we were going to reach the playoffs. Obviously, that was probably last year's hype a little bit as well. But yeah, I mean, you look at your Sheffield Wednesdays, your Ipswiches, your Charltons, or I mean, you know, you look at Charlton. They paid a lot of money for Charlie Kirk and Jesse Amy that was at Swindon last year as well. there's some big football clubs in this division. At least nearly half the league have played in the Premier League at some point in their sort of their history. So where do we rank next to those teams? Probably a million miles off. And I sort of heard things over the summer that we were looking at Marvin Johnson, who's gone to Sheffield Wednesday. Obviously, he was a player that's playing under Michael Appleton at Oxford. It looked like but Johnson was going to come here, and then Sheffield Wednesday came in last minute and doubled the ways that we were able to offer. So, you're looking at clubs like that and thinking we're absolutely nowhere near you, which is why cup runs, especially famously Lincoln with that FA Cup run of 4 or 5 years ago, it's so massive for football clubs like Lincoln, because that helps us generate a lot of income. We managed to get the training ground off the back of that. We managed to sign some good players off the back of that. So financially we're a million miles off. So you look at the business that's Ipswich did 20 odd players over the summer, and some really good players in that. Chaplin, Macaulay Bonne. I think we're probably a million miles off in terms of coming in the top six, especially when you look at the figures that are being chucked around at the moment in this division.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough one at the minute, you think, to get out of. Now, let's talk about a man who's very popular at Sincilbank, and that's Michael Appleton. He's been at the Imps for over 2 years now, and over the summer he was linked with a few clubs. I seem to remember, West Brom and Swansea were both linked, but he remained at Lincoln. He's quite clearly done an excellent job at the club, Jake. Are you worried that, as the managerial merry-go-round, it starts to fire up in the Championship like it usually does at the end of a year, midway through a season? I guess, already has started with the likes of Cardiff and Barnsley sacking their managers. Do you think Appleton may be courted by, clubs at a higher level, and his head potentially could be turned?
I mean, you can never say never in football. But the one thing that I am is I'm not as worried as what I was when Cowley was in charge. So that summer before Cowley left the football club, he was linked with the likes of West Brom, Sheffield Wednesday. He eventually went to Huddersfield and got sacked unjustly there. But in terms of Appleton, am I worried that he's going to leave? Not particularly. I think he's fairly settled at Lincoln. Just before, I think it was December 2019, we did a live podcast with Michael Appleton and Harry Toffolo at the football club. And the line that sort of stuck out for everyone that was there that evening was that Appleton said that by the end of his contract, he wanted to guide Lincoln to the Championship. He's since signed a contract extension, so we're all very happy with Appleton. Obviously, last year massively overachieved. But yeah, Appleton, obviously, there's always the worry, isn't there, that your manager can get turned. Nobody thought Russ Martin would have left MK Dons after assembling a squad that he's done. But Appleton's just had a young child of his wife. I think they seem pretty settled around the Lincoln area. So we've got that going in our favour. And, he's adored by the supporters of the football club, and he's very well liked. I think one of the reasons he took the job was the fact that he liked the people that work in behind the scenes. Where obviously he's had jobs at Blackburn, Blackpool, where the Pompey, where the behind the scenes team perhaps weren't as good as what they are at Lincoln. So I'd like to think that Appleton is happy at Lincoln, and will ride the crest of the wave if we're seeing him in the favourites for Championship jobs. But sooner rather than later, he's got he's had previous of leaving football clubs being the number one. Obviously, he left Oxford to go and be the number two at Leicester, so we've sort of got that to worry about as well if he wants to go to a Premier League club and become a number two. But we're happy with Appleton. Whether he's happy with us, obviously we aren't sure because we're not in his head. But we'd like to think that Appleton is happy with us and won't be going to the Championship unless it's with us.
Yeah, he's certainly building something very good at Sincilbank. Now, this is a player we mentioned earlier, but Josh Griffiths, he's coming from West Brom, the Appleton using his links at the Baggies to secure that deal. Obviously, it's a road they've gone down before. Alex Palmer was loaned in last season from West Brom, but what might be a concern, Griffiths didn't play in the FA Cup this past weekend against Bowers and Pitsea. West Brom refused to grant permission for Griffiths to play. That potentially could be a view to him being recalled in January with Sam Johnson's situation, being very up in the air. Is that a big concern, Jake? How has Griffiths got on? Obviously had a very impressive season with Cheltenham in League Two last season for such a young keeper. Has he continued that progression at Lincoln, and could you see him being a Championship keeper in the next 6 to 12 months?
I think so, yeah. obviously the Sam Johnson situation, I think it's very obvious that he's playing above his station in terms of the fact that he could quite comfortably be in the Premier League. And you're looking at 5 years ago, would Lincoln ever be involved in a chain where a goalkeeper would go on and play for a team like Spurs or whoever Johnson's going to go on and play for? Highly unlikely, given where we were sort of 5-10 years ago. So, but yeah, in terms of Josh, he's had to convince the Lincoln fans a lot this year. He had a bit of a shaky start. I remember the game against Bolton at home. He seemed to make a bit of a sort of rush of blood decision and came out, and it sort of led to the winner for Bolton. So he's had to win them over. He did that convincingly, I think, against Rotherham. He was outstanding. I think Rotherham probably should have scored 7 or 8 goals that evening, but Josh Griffiths has managed to limit them down to 1, so we got a point out the game. Yeah, he's been really impressive, Josh. I really like him. I'm a goalkeeper myself. I can sort of see the spectacular in him. Obviously, he's been called up to the England under-21s at every international camp this year. So that sort of shows his quality. Are we worried we're going to lose him? If we do lose him, we're in a spot of bother. I think that's why we recalled Sam Long from his loan from Gainsborough. He's a goalkeeper that's come to the football club. I think he was at Crystal Palace before. He's sort of the future in terms. He's the one you're looking at a goalkeeper that will play in goal for Lincoln sort of in the next 5 or so years and be a mainstay number 1. But if Josh goes back, we are in a spot of bother really, because we've got Sam Long, who's 19-year-old goalkeeper who's not really got any experience in senior football apart from a few Papa John's Trophy games and then the game against Bowers on the weekend. And then you've got Archie Mayer, who's, well, we're not to believe he's fit. He's on loan from Norwich. He's not featured at all. He's been called up to the Scottish under-21s this week, though, so that might be sort of a sign that he's getting fit. But Josh going in the window would be detrimental to Lincoln City, because he's been outstanding since probably the 3rd game in. So you're looking at 13 games or so. He's been phenomenal, and it'll be hard to replace him, absolutely, because I think he's probably one of the best in terms of can just pull the spectacular out of nowhere in the division. But players come and go in football, don't they? So I'm sure Lincoln will be able to replace him. And with Michael Appleton, you never really fault the recruitment, really.
Yeah, I'm sure Appleton will have a few links if Griffiths does end up going back to West Brom. He'll be able to source one. So we've had a comment from Links on YouTube saying "up the Imps," which is a nice
That's
one.
my barber.
That's your barber.
It is.
Nice to get your comment in, Links. Now, I think it can be agreed that one player who's perhaps a standout to probably neutrals is Anthony Scully. 7 goals in League One this season, 11 in all competitions. Tied down to the club until the summer of 2023. I guess, Jake, like the Appleton situation, there's a worry that in January there could be other clubs sniffing around if he carries on this form he's on. We've seen the club standing, a players wave teams from a higher level show significant interest. So I guess, it must be a slight concern that, those goals could disappear. But on the other hand, if that does happen, I guess you'd trust the club to find a suitable replacement.
Well, absolutely. The model with Appleton is to get the player that you want to replace the player with 6 months in before that player eventually goes on and does better things. So that potentially might, look to happen this January, where we look to replace Scully before he goes out the window in the summer. We don't know. In terms of Scully, really, it was sort of the 12th man last year, which seems really harsh. But we had a front three towards the back end of the year of Brennan Johnson, Morgan Rogers, and Tom Hopper, who was Hopper was detrimental to the way that we wanted to play. So he was always going to start. And Scully sort of, when he came as a centre forward from West Ham, coming out their academy. But he's never sort of established himself as a number 9. He got 16 goals in all comps last year, which is really impressive. But as I say, he's more of a left winger really for us. So yeah, obviously we've had interest in Scully before. I think Luton and Cardiff were probably sniffing around him in the summer, and then he started the season like an absolute. He was on absolute fire. He scored twice at Cambridge and got 3 assists in the same game. Scored both the goals against Fleetwood, I believe, as well. He struck a really good partnership up with Teo Eden, especially that game against Fleetwood that I mentioned. Teo got both the assists, I seem to believe. But Scotty sort of picked up an injury over the last sort of couple of weeks, which has been actually quite beneficial for Lincoln, because before the injury, I felt that we were very one dimensional in terms of the fact that it was give Scully the ball, he'll run at the opposition, and we'll react to what goes off there. Whereas now we're sort of a little bit less predictable in terms of the threats coming from all over the pitch rather than one player. But as I mentioned, sort of with Teo and George, the club won't stand in the way if the club gets a really big bid in January, or I think it's most likely going to be this summer because I think he's sort of blown cold before he got injured. I'm thinking it's probably going to be this summer that he gets his move off the Championship. Probably deserved, really deserved, because when we signed him, he was straight out of academy football. You get these sorts of players, don't you, that look really good on the day and then they fade in and out of games. But yeah, Scully's a really good footballer, and we're sort of happy to have him at the football club at the minute, obviously. And it's more we're sort of resigned to losing him at some point because obviously he's sort of so detrimental when we're playing with him. So I can see him playing in the Championship. I can see him being successful in the Championship. So yeah, Scully's definitely one for Championship fans to keep an eye out on because he could well be playing at your club sort of in the next 18 months or so.
Yeah, he's definitely made an impact since he came to Lincoln. Now, speaking of potential transfers, we're less than 2 months from the January transfer window. Is there, Jake, any areas you think that the club could strengthen this month, or even any players you think that could be afforded to cut loose? I think from an outsider looking at the squad, it does seem to have a bit of a decent amount of depth. So could it be a case of having to lose someone to bring someone in?
It could be. There are a couple of players that are probably not getting the first team football at the moment that they'd like. Remy Longden is certainly one of those. Max Sanders, who came from Brighton January, but I don't think Sanders will go because I think he'll get his chance. But in terms of where we need to recruit, it's up front. I think it's very well known amongst Lincoln City fans that we had a deal in place for Morgan Whittaker from Swansea to come in on loan in the summer. We waited and waited and waited for that deal to come through. Fell through at the 11th hour. Something similar that we did with Brian Johnson actually last year. We waited for Johnson, and obviously he came this year. It's not really paid off. Whittaker was forced to stay at Swansea. From what we're led to believe, the club are going to go back in for Morgan Whittaker. So that would be a sort of again similar to Scully. I think Morgan Whittaker, when he was at Derby County, it was a striker, but at Swansea, he's sort of been played more utilised on the wing. So we'll have to see how Appleton does that. But we still need a couple more strikers. At the moment, we've got Hopper out injured. Our only recognised number 9 is down in Londonderry. And you've got Freddie Draper, who's an academy graduate. But then you also need some wide players like Whittaker if he's going to play out there. We've got Theo Archibald out on loan at Leyton Orient. He's a player that could be recalled. I think he's doing pretty well down there. A player that wasn't given really sort of was frozen out because of the form of Johnson and Rogers. Obviously, maybe a goalkeeper if Josh was to be recalled by West Brom. Obviously, a goalkeeper of that quality is going to be difficult to replace. And then I mean, this would be sort of the icing on the cake, really. But I think we need a creative midfielder. A lot of teams have sort of come to Central Bank, especially Shrewsbury. They sat 11 men behind the ball and said, "All right, pick us off," and we weren't able to do it. So. We're really missing somebody with George Grant's killer pass. George Grant last year, when teams sat deep, he could just play that ball in between the half space between the centre half and the full back, and we'd be on our way there. And obviously, I think we're probably going to have to sell, which might be where Scully goes out and we bring in a couple in. But I think Appleton was pretty adamant, sort of towards the back, just coming out of the summer window, that he was pretty. He needed some attackers, and I think the board have sort of acted swiftly, and I feel like we might have a few deals in place already to get that sorted.
Yeah, it could definitely be a busy transfer window for Lincoln, both in terms of in and out. Finally, Jake, just a quick little prediction for the rest of the season. Obviously, mid-table isn't particularly where you or the club want to be, but I assume you think the team, obviously with so much talent in it, it could potentially click and push up the table. But obviously, you've said earlier on that you're wary of the other teams with a lot more firepower might come to the fore in the next few months. So what's your prediction for Lincoln this season?
I think we'll probably finish where we are. What I'd like us to do is sort of stay within touching distance until January of the playoffs, and then look to reassess there and recruit and hopefully do something similar to what Blackpool did. Obviously, I'm under no illusions that could happen because of the football clubs are at this level, and the players that they can just bring in at a click of a finger. But I sort of think, as I said earlier, it's about the football club catching up to what we're doing on the pitch, doing off the pitch. We've got a new stand sort of being the Stacey West stand is being redeveloped, which would be massive for the football club, bringing some more fans in. But yeah, this year sort of keep in League One, bring some more academy graduates through. Hopefully, see a few more of them come into the first team, more than Freddie Draper and Sam Long that we've already got. But I can sort of see us finishing where we are. Consistently inconsistent would be Lincoln sort of where we are this year. But you take another year in League One based off what we've sort of been through the last 15 years. So yeah, I think we're probably going to finish around where we are now.
Brilliant. Just got a quick comment here from Will Sugg. Don't know how Lincoln got a tune out of Grant at Mansfield. He just looked uninterested. I think that loan spell was just before he signed for Lincoln permanently. In the first season, I think, for Lincoln Grant, he only got a couple of goals. And is it just something that clicked last season where he, started firing in the goals and being creative, which got him his move?
I think the thing with George was Michael Appleton gave him a lot of responsibility around the training ground, so he was made vice captain. Appleton put a lot of responsibility. Obviously, last year, looking at the squad last year, George was one of the more experienced pros that we had on the books. That was ours. So he's given a lot of responsibility, and you give a player the captain's armband, it can do a wonder for them, can't it? And George really took that responsibility and won us a lot of points last year as well.
Yeah, well, he's certainly getting his game time in the Championship now. Well, that wraps up our Lincoln City Takeover show. It will be available to watch back on YouTube and Twitter, so don't hesitate to give it a share or a retweet. Thank you, Jake, for joining me this evening. Tomorrow, we've got a bumper day of FLW TV content. We've got Coventry, Fulham, and Hull City fan debates on the best strikers of all time for all three clubs. We've also got the London Club Roundup show and also another debate show on Sunderland and if Lee Johnson can get them promoted, which should be an interesting one. So stay tuned for all of that. And until next time, we will see you later.